Andrew, Maria talking about Vladimir Putin's objectives in Ukraine. I have yet to hear anybody articulating those objectives clearly. What do you think they are?
Well, we heard from President Putin himself on the 24th of February that what he was trying to do was denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. The Nazi trope has been one that Russia has used to malign Ukraine for a long time. It's absolutely baseless. And it's just a code word for regime change. So he wants to remove Zelensky, replace him with a more pliant leader. And he wants to get the Ukrainian military to stand down their arms and accept a enforced neutrality. They simply don't want to have a country that might eventually move toward NATO on their borders.
Andrew, can you talk to us a little bit about the ramifications of these actions within Russia itself? Talk to us a little bit about the picture of stability in terms of domestic politics. What does it look like?
Well, for years, Putin has assembled this so-called vertical of power, whereby he has absolute authority over pretty much any consequential decision that might affect Russia's domestic or foreign affairs. The challenge here is that he's launched a war that is essentially unwinnable. His objectives are unachievable. And the Western response is a lot more united and difficult than I think he would have expected. At this point, the economy is melting down. Russian forces are facing some setbacks on the battlefield, even though they are still pushing forward. So I think that's going to raise pressure on him, both from the streets and also among his advisors, among the top political elites. That's going to put him in a position where he's been more vulnerable than ever before, although he certainly still has plenty of tools at his disposal to keep the lid on discontent and dissatisfaction in Russia.
Many military strategists, tacticians, will talk about the fact that you don't want to push an enemy into a corner with no way out. Are we pushing, with the ferocity of the response to this Ukrainian invasion, Vladimir Putin into a position where he has no way out other than to escalate?
That is certainly a risk. What we've seen here is that Putin apparently really perceives his country to be at risk. I think the fact that he's brought up this potential, raising the readiness of nuclear forces does up the ante a little bit. And I think that just shows, how he perceives the Western response to Russia's aggression as a strategic threat. So right now, we understand that the nuclear forces have gone from the lowest to second lowest level of readiness. And this is something that I think is reflective of Russia's long-held military doctrine of escalating to de-escalate. You raise the potential for the use of nuclear weapons on the assumption that your adversary will perceive that that's too much of a risk and they'll back down. I think that's what we're seeing here. Putin is really running out of options in terms of trying to control the narrative, to keep the lid on things, and to counteract some very difficult sanctions and punitive measures that the West have brought against him.
Andrew, we just talked about escalation. Let's talk about de-escalation. One of the major issues in terms of this conflict when it comes to simply the read-through into international markets is, of course, the oil supply. A lot of the assumption here is that Russian barrels are going to be completely taken off the market. But if you talk to oil strategists, and we just did this earlier in our show, we do actually really need those barrels. So is there any situation or any near-term situation or scenario, I should say, that actually means that those Russian barrels can actually get back on the market, perhaps in a scenario of de-escalation and just getting on better terms between both countries?
Well, I think now that the effect of sanctions is being felt, there might be some pressure on the Russians to actually come and find some sort of pathways for de-escalation, to have some sort of negotiations open up. I haven't seen or heard too many conversations in Washington lately about giving Putin that de-escalation pathway. I think we're still so early in the application of these sanctions that they're still kind of taking their effect. We want Putin to feel that pain politically and economically. In order to protect the flow of oil and gas from Russia, I mean, there has been an effort to ensure that sanctions aren't targeting those sectors. Again, however, as this situation escalates, that might have to come on the table. But if Putin really needs to keep those flows going for his own regime stability, then he might be compelled to consider changing certain tactics, maybe refraining from the use of certain weapons, some sort of limitation to be met in response by a reduction in pressure from the West.